Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, Sherrone Moore, Michigan. I'm going to be taking some monster swings on the recruiting trail over the next couple of days as we're really looking at some of the best kids from across the country taking official visits up to Ann Arbor. Now, I want to start this conversation off with a few talking points before we get nitty gritty, talk about the players that will be on campus. If there's one thing that we've learned from Sherrone Moore during his tenure running this Michigan football program, it's that he ain't going to take a backseat to nobody on the recruiting trail, which a little bit of a different story than what we saw under Jim Harbaugh. I think Michigan's looking at this. I think Sherrone Moore is looking at this Michigan program and saying, hey, why can't Michigan be a powerhouse on the recruiting trail? It's a program that's won Big Ten championships, won national championships over the last couple of years, has been one of, if not the best program in the country at developing guys to the NFL, is about the bluest of blue bloods in terms of college football programs. I think Sherrone Moore's looking at Michigan and saying, hey, Michigan should be a powerhouse on the recruiting trail. And it's something as a Michigan fan, I appreciate it. I think a lot of Michigan fans appreciate. The second thing that we've seen is for some of the top targets from across the country, you've seen Michigan move in silence on. And what I mean by that is, all right, some of the names that we're about to talk about that are coming up for official visits, Michigan might not be considered the leader heading into the summer. Well, we've seen that before, with guys like Ty Hayward, even a guy like Bryce Underwood, where some of these high profile guys, some of the best players from across the country, it's for lack of better terms, it's big boy recruitments. There are a lot of different moving parts when you're talking about some of the best players from across the country. And oftentimes, at least what we saw in 2025, is that, look, it's not always going to seem like Michigan is the leader in the clubhouse on the recruiting trail for some of these guys right now. Well, we'll see what it looks like coming out of the official visit. And we'll see what it looks like somewhere down the road where we've seen Michigan come out of nowhere and get it done for some of the best names in the sport. I think Bryce Underwood is by far the best example where, I think many Michigan fans who are watching this episode in the middle of the summer know this, that, Michigan made a push behind closed doors for Bryce Underwood dating back to the early months of the fall. It really only came to the national media's attention late October going into November. Wouldn't be surprised if we see that take place once again in the 2026 cycle, which I think excites a lot of Michigan fans because we're about to talk about some of the best players in the country that, look, Michigan might not be trending for right now. They might be trending for somewhere down the road. Now, before we get into the players, I just want to say thank you to you guys and especially to the Michigan fans. Many of y'all know I'm a Michigan fan myself. Have followed the recruiting trail my whole entire life. It's one of the aspects of college football that I really enjoy talking about, and the amount of Michigan fans that have shown support to the fellas in the offseason as we talk the recruiting trail. It's been amazing. I can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's start with a guy that is no doubt in my mind a top priority for Sherrone Moore in Michigan. That's Felix Ojo. What is fascinating about Felix Ojo, at least to me, is that he's by far the best pass protecting tackle you see in this 2026 cycle. We see some guys like Jackson Cantwell. We see some guys like Emmanuel and Chano that are big body road graders in the run game, but maybe have some question marks in pass protection. I look at Felix Ojo and say 6'6", 275, 34-inch arms, smooth feet, light on his feet, carries the weight extremely well, and say this is a guy that there's not a tackle across the country that has the functional athleticism and movement patterns that Felix Ojo has. Now, why I think this is such a dynamite fit for Michigan is there ain't been many programs in the country that develop offensive linemen better, but just as importantly, develop bodies better either. I look at Felix Ojo and say, this kid's going to be a stud. And you put weight on him the right way, get him up to 310 pounds, which shouldn't be a problem because the frame is really big. He's a really long kid. The sky's the limit for what he can be as an offensive tackle. And again, although Michigan is probably not the leader in the clubhouse, and like you're always going to have to do with the number one offensive tackle in the country, you're going to go up against some of the bigger programs in the country, Ohio State and Texas. I wouldn't be surprised if Sherrone Moore in Michigan make a massive push for this kid over the next couple of days and have some of those big boy conversations that can maybe turn the tides in this recruitment. Number two on the list, and another guy that I like, and that's going to be a trend here, is like the names that are going to be on campus this weekend are some of my favorite names in the 2026 cycle. Khary Adams, top 50 national player, in my opinion, one of, if not the best cornerbacks in the country. This fits the athletic profile that Michigan wants. We've seen another shift in terms of Sherrone Moore and how he's running this program, especially on the outside, your wide receivers and cornerbacks. He's leaning into athletic profiles. We want big, fast wide receivers and cornerbacks. Go back to the 2025 class, guys like Shamari Earls, guys like Jaden Sanders from Texas. Michigan wants big bodies at the cornerback position. Now, why is that the question? I think because you look at, all right, what are the goals for Michigan as a program? It's, especially with Bryce Underwood for the next couple of years, national championships. All right, what teams do you have to go through to go out and win national championships? Teams like Ohio State, teams like Texas, teams like Oregon. All of those programs have freaky wide receivers. If you want to be able to deal with those freaky wide receivers, you need freaky cornerbacks. You need big cornerbacks that can run. Khary Adams, 6'2", 180, 10-7 in the 100-meter dash. What I love about Khary Adams the most, he backs up his athletic profile on the football field. There are some cornerbacks in this class that are very highly ranked because of the athletic profile, the size and speed metrics, and then you turn on the film and say, I don't see the 10-7 100-meter dash speed that I'm being told he runs on the track and field. Khary Adams ain't one of those guys. Extremely explosive individual, extremely physical individual. He checks all the boxes that you want at the cornerback spot, and you start looking at the kind of bodies you need to go out and win national championships, to go out and cover wide receivers from Ohio State and Texas. I think Khary Adams is one of those guys. And obviously Michigan wants these kind of guys in their room. Lamar Morgan, Sherrone Moore, Wink Martindale made that very clear. Number three on the list, Trenton Henderson. This is a unique one because I really like Trenton Henderson. A little bit of a weird fit in this Michigan defense. It's been clear that Michigan wants, heavy-handed edge guys that are really good against the run too. Trenton Henderson at this point in his development, more of a, stand-up outside linebacker, really, really good first step, really, really good length. The pass rushing chops that this kid has, they're special. Now, what I don't want to say is, hey, Trent Henderson, he's only going into his senior year. He's got a really big frame, very well could get up to around 250 pounds and be that heavy-handed guy that Michigan's looking for. This is one of those examples where don't worry about the fit. Just worry about getting good football players. And I look at Trent Henderson and say there ain't many edge rushers in the country that have the upside that Trent Henderson has. And again, if you're Michigan, you are leaning into the development that you've had on the defensive line. In my opinion, and maybe I got some maize and blue tinted glasses on, I look at Michigan and say they ain't a program across the country that is developing defensive line players the way Michigan has over the last 5 years. And I think Lou Esposito is one of the best in the game. And so if you're Michigan, you're leaning into the development in a world of recruiting where everybody wants to talk about NIL. And I ain't going to get up here and be naive to the fact that NIL matters, especially in these high-profile recruitments. You also want to remind these kids that the big payday is coming in the NFL draft. And there's just not many programs across the country that are getting these guys selected highly in the NFL draft like Michigan. Trenton Henderson, this guy very well could be a first-round NFL draft pick over the next couple of years, and a guy that no doubt Michigan wants to prioritize. Again, you look at Michigan on the recruiting trail, it ain't no secret. We want the bulk of our elite players coming into our program along the lines of scrimmage. That's what led Michigan to a national championship in 2023. And I truly think that's the blueprint, I should say, for Sherrone Moore to win national championships over the next 5 years. Next one on the list, Nick Abrams. Another story of, hey, Michigan's leaning into size and speed at linebacker, especially speed. We need guys that can close the gap between themselves and the ball carriers at very high levels. They ain't many better than Nick Abrams. I think he's criminally underrated. I haven't watched many linebackers that I like more. This kid can do it all. Whether it's as a quarterback spy in a run and chase linebacker mode, whether it's going out and tackling running backs in the flat and being really good in space, whether it's covering tight ends up the seam. This is a conversation we've talked a lot about for Michigan. One of the biggest storylines that has gotten Michigan over the hump against teams like Ohio State, their athleticism at the linebacker position. For so long, Michigan had these really good linebackers that would have been elite linebackers in the 2010s in the Big Ten. But as the sport has transitioned to more speed and space, as you've seen teams like Ohio State lean into more four wide receiver sets and try to test the speed of Michigan's defense, you saw Michigan lag behind. And you saw Michigan defenses in the 2010s that just couldn't run with Ohio State in space. I look at a guy like Nick Abrams. I look at guys like Cole Sullivan. I look at guys like a Junior Colson was really the first hyper athletic linebacker that Michigan took, and say a large part of why Michigan has had success over the last couple of years. They got second level defenders that can cook, and Nick Abrams is one of them. Carter Scruggs on the offensive line. This one, we'll see if a lot of crystal balls coming in for this kid at Clemson, and he might commit to Clemson and not take the visit. I still think this is a guy that Michigan likes a lot. Kind of reminds you of a little bit like Trevor Keegan. Very well could be a great right tackle. I probably see him at his best as an interior offensive lineman, but a guy that's really polished, has the ability to play early, and a guy that's a blue chip offensive lineman. And what I mean by that is not just because he's a 4-star prospect. What I mean by blue chip guy on the offensive line is there's not a ton of projection that's going into this one. There are a lot of offensive linemen that you kind of have to project. What's it going to look like at the collegiate ranks? I look at Carter Scruggs and say, hey, he might not have the upside that a guy like Andrew Babalow or Andrew Sprague have. Going to be a solid football player for Michigan. Last name I'll talk about, Amari Latimer. Look, I think at the running back position, it's Savion Hitter or bust. Hyder, excuse me, or bust. I think that's kind of how Michigan wants it to look. If there's another running back Michigan seems to really like, and it's really the only other running back that Michigan outside of Javion Osborne has recruited pretty dang hard, it's Amari. This kid kind of rocks, man. He's 6 foot. He's 215 pounds, long legs, but the contact balance is really good. He's one of the more physically imposing running backs that you see in this 2026 cycle. Kind of has a little bit of Kalel Mullings in him, but I would argue a little bit better in space, a little bit better in terms of making people miss. Now, he's not as twitchy and as fluid as a guy like Savion Hyder, and that's why Savion Hyder's a top 20 prospect in the country. This kid fits what Michigan wants to do. I think it's a damn good running back. We'll kind of see how this one turns out. I know Wisconsin, family ties, probably the leader in the clubhouse. That'll do it. Plenty of other names that will be on campus. I wanted to highlight some of my favorites, some of the guys that if you're Michigan and you're trying to put together, hey, what's a really good class look like for Michigan in 2026, it probably includes a couple of the names that we just talked about. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.